Hello, troublemakers. Welcome to the very first episode of Resolved Labor Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Regina v. Polk. Regina v. Polk was born February 14th, 1950. Shout out to the Aquariuses. Her parents were Helen and Henry Polk. Helen was the youngest of 5 children. She was raised in Pennsylvania. She graduated from nursing school, and after working as a nurse in a school and a camp, she got a little bored. So she packed her car and drove across country by herself. She got a job as a civilian nurse with the Navy in San Pedro, California. Henry was from Texas, one of 6 children. He went to school through the 8th grade. When he left home as a teenager, he joined the Navy. He went back home to Texas for a while, but his spirit called him out west, and he ended up in San Pedro working in the Navy shipyard as a civilian carpenter. Henry's first wife was a woman named Alice. They were married briefly, but unfortunately, Alice passed away in 1944 from breast cancer. Shortly after her death, Henry married Helen, who happened to be a friend of Alice, now the T. According to Regina's older sister Eileen, and this is her words, not mine, she feels like her father Henry was still rebounding from the death of Alice, when he got with their mom, Helen. And according to Eileen, she settled on Henry because she didn't think that she would find another guy who liked her, because Helen was a little bit on the big side. She was a big girl, she was a little thick, so she just settled for Henry. So I'm going to put a pin in that to just remind my listeners that big backs do get bent, so you do not have to settle. But moving on. When the war was over, the family moved to Arizona, and Henry and Helen worked as farmers. They had Eileen first, and then, like I said before, February 14th, 3 years later, Regina was born. She had a heart-shaped birthmark on her forehead. Regina had a love for animals from the start. According to her sister, when Regina was around 6 years old, she tried to, quote, save a mouse that she found. Unfortunately, this resulted in a bite, and Regina had to get a series of rabies shots that were very painful. However, a few years later, Eileen doesn't remember which animal it was, but Regina was bitten again by a wild animal and again had to go through a very painful series of rabies shots. So you can see where I'm going here. Girlfriend just doesn't learn. By the time she was in high school, Regina could throw a ball faster than any boy, and she was really good at drumming. She got involved in Civil Air Patrol, and she also went on a lot of rescue and recovery missions. At the age of 14, Regina was blossoming into a beautiful young woman who started getting attention from boys. And to her parents' chagrin, she liked this attention. She got her first boyfriend when she was a freshman in high school. He was a senior, but the romance didn't last very long because Henry retired and the family moved to Paradise, California. The Polks settled into a John Burke's Society town. During the 1960s, the John Burke Society opposed the civil rights movement, and they basically believed that the civil rights movement was backed by the American Communist Party. The town consisted of, they were just God-fearing patriots. They were promoting, all things, small government, and their motto was less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. I swear to God, this is their motto. As you probably figured out by now, there were no blacks or Hispanics in good old Paradise, California. Regina played baseball and touch football. She was good at the drums, and she became the school's first female bass drummer while she was still a freshman. She didn't really enjoy, bending gender roles. She just didn't give it much thought. Through the encouragement of her mom, Regina attended the prestigious all-girls Miles College in Oakland, California. She knew she wanted to help others and chose sociology as her major. It wasn't easy for Regina. Her family wasn't rich, like her classmates. She was always trying to keep up with them, and this led to her overcharging her credit a lot. Eventually, Regina met a man who introduced her to politics and took her to anti war demonstrations. But according to Regina's friend, the tea is that this guy, his name was Kenneth, he had a strong, demanding personality. This reads jerk all over it. This clashed with Regina's personality, so with that, Kenneth was gone. Regina eventually found herself at UC Berkeley. The vibe was completely different from the all-female Miles College. Now she's at a co-ed college, and at UC Berkeley, the vibe was all things social justice, civil rights, and feminism. After college, Regina lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico for a while, where she worked as a waitress to make ends meet. Just like her mom before her, she got bored, packed her things, and moved to Chicago with a group of friends. Along the way, Regina always had dogs and a boyfriend. According to her friend, the boyfriends didn't last, but the dogs always did. Same girl, same. To support herself in graduate school, Regina got a job at the Red Star Inn Steakhouse in North Side Chicago. One of the first things she noticed was that the back of the house staff, those would be your dishwashers, your busboys, waitresses, and kitchen staff, she noticed that they were all underpaid, overworked, and verbally abused daily. So she reached out to the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union for help. Unfortunately, they were like, get somebody else to do it. Somebody gave her the phone number of Bob Simpson. He was an organizing director for Teamsters Local 743. He says his first impression of Regina was, quote, I saw her as a hippie. She was for all kinds of rights, worker rights, civil rights, women's lib, end quote. He did not want to put the effort in to organize the Red Star Inn. His belief was you don't get a lot of bang for your buck in organizing restaurant workers. But Regina wouldn't stop, so Simpson gave in and agreed to help her. He explained how to get it done. He told her to get 30% of the workers to sign union cards. Then they would file a petition with the National Labor Relations Board for an election. Then 51% of the workers had to vote for it. Simpson gave her the cards and was like, may the odds be ever in your favor. Regina immediately got to work organizing. But before the workers could file the petition for recognition, Regina was fired. Somebody probably told on her, probably told that she was organizing. Simpson filed an unfair labor practice with the National Labor Relations Board immediately. And in the meantime, he hired Regina to do some part-time work for Local 743. She started out writing leaflets and passing them out to factories. Eventually, Red Star settled the case with Regina in exchange for not coming back. They gave her a cash settlement. By the time Regina got her settlement from the Red Star Inn, she was over it anyway with trying to get her job back there because her working with the Teamsters had ignited a passion in her that she didn't know that she had. In 1975, she decided to interview for a full-time position with the Teamsters. And, ironically enough, it was Bob Simpson who encouraged her to do this. He was impressed with her work, while she was off and the little part-time stuff that he gave her. He really enjoyed the work that she was doing. So he encouraged her to come on full-time with the Teamsters. She had a college degree and she was a woman. This combination alone made her a first at Local 743. Just before she quit graduate school at University of Chicago to work full-time with the Teamsters, Regina met Tom Heege. He was a cute economics major. They met together in a class they were both taking called Labor Market Discrimination. He said that he only took that class to, quote, meet cute girls. When they met, Tom had already earned his MBA from the University of Chicago and completed a stint at London School of Economics. He was on leave from the First National Bank's First Scholars Program in pursuit of his PhD. He was madly in love with Regina. He gives her credit for changing his heart about the value of unions. Tom eventually dropped out of his doctorate program. He would become CEO of South Shore Bank before the age of 30. Regina's first organizing assignment was to work on a campaign to unionize 1,800 white collar workers at Blue Cross Blue Shield. The workers were majority women, somewhat educated, and of various race. Although there were several organizers on the Blue Cross Blue Shield campaign, Regina became close with Vicky Saporta. She was also young, passionate, and educated. And they shared the quote, why are we doing this sentiment about organizing? But they both believed that the Teamsters were the organization that could do the greatest good for union people. The Teamsters lost the Blue Cross Blue Shield election, but the union filed charges against the company, and the National Labor Relations Board ordered a new election in which the union won. Over the course of the campaign, as Regina began to find her own voice and become more visible, this started to kind of rub Bob Simpson the wrong way. I mean, it's kind of crazy because Bob is the one that actually brought her into the fold, and maybe he just felt like her star was rising, and she was shining a little bit brightly like some people do. But at some point, he became so irritated that he was overheard threatening to throw her white bitch ass out the window, end quote. But Regina was not deterred. In 1976, she wrote a groundbreaking resolution that was adopted by the Teamsters. This resolution called upon the International Brotherhood to launch intense organizing campaigns directed at areas of the labor movement where women are concentrated. The resolution reads as follows. Therefore, the Teamsters Women's Council calls upon the International Brotherhood of Teamsters to 1. Launch an intensive national organizing campaign directed at those areas of the labor force in which women are concentrated. 2. Work for equal opportunity on the job, whereby the collective bargaining agreement shall be the means of dealing the death blows to the employer's tools of discrimination, i.e. wage differentials based on sex, dual seniority list, etc. 3. Express acknowledgement and appreciation of the valuable contributions of Teamster women over the years. 4. Promote greater participation of women members at every level of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. And 5. Organize area conferences of Teamster women to be held the next 12 months for the purpose of developing programs to implement this resolution. Representatives from these area conferences to then convene for a national conference. In 1978, Regina was assigned to organize clerical workers at University of Chicago Hospital. As the campaign heated up, the horns came out, but not from management like we'd expect. It was actually from within the Brotherhood. She had been promoted to head the campaign, but the older, more senior women who were not as successful were jealous, and the majority of men felt like she was moving up too fast. But in 1979, the union won that campaign by a vote of 743 to 722. Regina negotiated their first contract, and after 2 weeks at the table, the union won. All union members got 23% salary raise after 2 years. 932 secretaries got promoted to higher pay grades, plus 40 cents per hour raises. Joint union management committees were established to revise the classification system, security rights, and bumping rights system. And short-term disability and a grievance procedure was established. Regina continued to rise. She continued to shine. In May of 1981, she gave a historic speech at the local 743 Stewards Seminar called Bastards with Briefcases, Protection of Your Contractual Gains. She spoke of the growth of the anti-union law firms and consultants. At that time, this was a $500 million a year industry. So just to give you guys some context, Starbucks spends approximately $143 million a year on anti-union busting, consultants and law firms. This is still very, very big business. When you would think, just give that money to the workers, you'd probably save about $100 million. But I digress. She spoke. She spoke of the responsibility of stewards to protect our contract every day, that stewards have an obligation to their members to protect the contract. Regina received a standing ovation for her speech. It was, it was stated that everyone in the room that night recognized the power of Regina Polk. In December of 1982, 2,600 workers at the catalog warehouse Aldean's in Chicago's West Side was laid off. Regina took the tragedy to heart. The majority of workers were minorities and women. Most of them had worked there their entire life. Most of them, didn't have a lot of education, and they lacked a lot of basic math and writing skills. So it was really hard for them to get other jobs. So what Regina did was she made arrangements with city colleges to help displaced workers brush up on basic skills in order to pass entrance exams. Her big picture vision was to buy deserted Chicago storefronts and turn them into professional training centers. The AFL-CIO asked her to conduct workshops throughout the state for laid off workers. Eventually, her efforts would result in success. The laid off Aldean workers would be the first to benefit from the Reagan administration's Federal Jobs Training Partnership Act. In 1983, Regina had been appointed to the Illinois Jobs Coordination Council by then Governor James Thompson. On October 11th, 1983, she got on an Air Illinois flight bound for Carbondale, Illinois. She was on her way to a meeting to try to get more funding for the retraining of displaced workers. There were 3 crew members and 7 passengers. The plane stopped briefly in Springfield, Illinois. The pilot reported a possible electrical problem to the control tower, but instead of servicing the plane, the pilot asked permission to fly at a lower altitude. Last contact with the plane was reported at 8:58 p.m. when the pilots reported they were nearing Centralia, Illinois. The pilot never said anything about weather, but thunderstorms had been reported. At 9:05 p.m., the craft disappeared from radar screens. 10 minutes later, the plane crashed 25 miles north from its destination. There were no survivors. Regina V. Polk was 33 years old. In 1985, the estate of Regina V. Polk was awarded $1.5 million in the wrongful death lawsuit against Air Illinois. And that, troublemakers, is the short, fiery story of Regina V. Polk. And I'm just going to tell you, in my opinion, my humble podcast nowhere near came to doing this woman justice. But unfortunately, we all only have so much time together. And my hope is just to educate you guys or motivate you guys on your way to work and in your lives and in your workspaces to kind of take these stories and embrace them and use them as motivation, in your lives. Shortly after Regina died, a group of union stewards at the University of Chicago met and, like we all do, they wanted to get together and just swap stories, grieve, smoke, cry. And they decided they wanted to do something to honor Regina's memory. So they went to her husband and they talked about starting a foundation of sorts, something that could organize women and, encourage them to do more in their locals and in their union. And thus the Regina V. Polk Scholarship Fund for Labor Leadership was created. Her husband, he's the one that put forth a lot of money, into this endowment. And now we have the Regina V. Polk School that is ran by the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And I just want to share with you guys, what the Polk School is. It was the inception, the foundation was started in 1983. The Polk School was started in 1988. And the Regina V. Polk, I'm reading off now, the Regina V. Polk Women's Labor Leadership Conference, or the Polk School, as it is fondly called, is an annual 4-day residential program focused on leadership development and restorative practices for women active in their unions and worker organizations. Directed by faculty in the School of Labor and Employment Relations at the University of Illinois since 1988, the program brings women workers from Illinois and throughout the United States together in a retreat-style setting to learn important skills to become leaders in their organization. The program includes workshops on subjects such as collective bargaining, grievance handling, organizing, communication, and public speaking, as well as interactive activities such as labor history tours and wellness programming. I hope that anybody within the sound of my voice, if you are a woman and or identify as a woman, or you have women in your unions, that you encourage them to apply for the Regina v. Polk School. I myself am an alumni of the 2017 class, and I can tell you that if you are new to the labor movement, if you're middle of the road with the labor movement, if you have some, a little bit more seniority in the labor movement and you'd like to share with up and coming activists, your voice is needed at the Polk School. So my hope is that you will all, encourage someone to apply for the Polk School. You don't have to be a Teamster. You don't have to be a particular union. You can be a new union like the Starbucks workers, right? And you guys just want to get more education, because I'm a firm believer that education will be the savior of us all. In the spirit of Regina v. Polk, she would always say, don't wait till somebody's gone to give them their flowers or to tell them that you love them, And so in that spirit, I would like to end this program, as I would like to with every program moving forward. I just want to give my flowers, and I just want to say thank you to a labor leader in my life. So the labor leader in my life that I would like to highlight is the Executive Director of Council 31, AFSCME, Illinois, Roberta Lynch. Roberta Lynch is a Philly girl. She's our executive director and just an all-around badass. She just negotiated a historic contract for the state workers in Illinois, and we are eternally grateful for her. She is a monster in the labor movement, and I just hope I aspire to get to the level of confidence that she exudes, and I hope to be able to inspire workers the way that she does, unapologetically. If there's somebody in your local that you guys want to give flowers to, or you would like for us to recognize on air, give us just write to resolvedlaborpod at gmail.com. That is resolvedlaborpod@gmail.com. And I would be honored to read your letter of appreciation to the activists in your local and in your lives out loud in one of the future episodes. As always, thank you for listening. Peace and solidarity. This week's episode of Resolved Labor Podcast is produced by The Create Place Studio. You can find them on all social media platforms at The Create Place STL. We Won is performed by Joe Jinks and written by John O'Connor. This has been Resolved Labor Podcast. As always, peace and solidarity.
Everybody come and join in the union. Begin. Stand together to overcome soon.